My intention with this presentation, I will be very quick, is just to give a broad overview, because I really think that what is gonna be discussed later on will be very interesting, also for us working in the AGRI, to understand about what will be your point of view on how the CAP can promote carbon farming. Next slide, please. I think that then also for the next discussion that we are having later on, it will be nice to keep in mind these main barriers that we found in the discussion we had together with the colleague of DG Clima and the stakeholders when implementing upscaling carbon farming. I think this can be very useful to have in mind, that can be a little bit steer the discussion later on, and also on the role of the CAP in helping in solving these barriers to carbon farming. We analyzed several examples which are already there. Both you have analysis in the communication, but also in the associated staff working document, and you can see, for example, here the guidance that has been produced, particularly in one of the study I already mentioned on the operationalization of carbon farming, where together setting examples there that can be of inspiration. We also try indeed with these examples to analyze how these barriers also can be solved. I would start, for example, sorry, there is somebody in the chat that's writing that they see a black page.
That's strange. I can see the presentation.
Yeah, the same for me. So
yeah. I'm not sure what it is, Marion, with your connection. It looks like most people can see it, so I think.
Okay, I'll continue then.
Thank you.
Anyway, the slides can be shared later on if you need. So sometimes we have to consider that introducing new management practices can result in additional cost and uncertainty on the result. So this is one of the main barriers for farmers to move to practices which are beneficial for carbon sequestration. Sometimes they need to change also in the machinery dotation they have at farm level. Sometimes you can have a lower yield, particularly in the beginning in the first years. So as we also mentioned, pointed out this morning, the carbon sequestration can be affected by several factors that are sometimes not 100% controllable by farmers. So at the end, there is also a little bit of uncertainty, and these aspects are somehow being creating barriers for the uptake for the participation of carbon on farmers and land managers to the carbon farming scheme. Having a robust monitoring, reporting, and verification system for carbon in ecosystem land management, it can be very complex and costly. You already pointed out this morning. Indeed, it is the case for. Of course, there is a big differences in depending on where we are, in which kind of farming system we are, in which kind of land use we are. But the general idea is that, and then we have tried to solve this aspect to let farmers to uptake to enter in carbon farming scheme. And we know when we see that also with the analysis that we've done, that there are methods which are already there, and that applied under different typology of voluntary schemes. They apply different methodology for calculating carbon credits, for example, and for ensuring permanence and reliability. But we noticed that there is a lack of standardization that create doubts on the reliability, the environmental integrity, and other fundamental aspects such as the additionality and the permanence. And this is basically also create a little bit of confusions, both for the supplier of credits, that will be farmers sequestering carbon, and both from the side of who can buy these credits, could be interested in these credits. And there are concerns around environmental integrity, additionality, and permanence, as we mentioned already. You need to ensure that while we are sequestering carbon, we are not creating problems on other environmental aspects. And then we noticed that there is still the need to have a more tailored training and advisory services in order to better reflect the local context. This has been mentioned in the chat already this morning, how important it is to tailor advices and strategies at really sometimes at farm level, at the holding level. Well, from this technical book, actually, you might have some examples on the implementation of also result-based carbon farming scheme that it can also serve as an inspiration for piloting schemes in Europe. And piloting is a very important way to also already to deal with these barriers. Next slide, please. So why the CAP? So the CAP remains a fundamental tool in land management. It can help indeed to solve one of some of these barriers. Farmers today are managing around the 40% of the EU land area for the production of agricultural product, and more than 85% of this land is receiving are managed by beneficiaries of the CAP. So the CAP can have indeed an important role in incentivizing the adoption of carbon farming. And indeed, it is already recognized, I mean, in the fact that we have a specific objective included in the new common agricultural policy, which is the specific objective 4, where climate mitigation and also adaptation is clearly mentioned. And of course, with climate mitigation, we refer not only to the reduction of emissions, but also to the increase and protection of sequestration. So somehow this is also replying a little bit to the question raised this morning by Irene on the fact that, okay, all the CAP is voluntary somehow, but in any case, there is a specific objective which is common at the European level to look at the climate mitigation. And then for these member states, they will have to set a strategy in order to deal with that, depending on their SWOT analysis, depending on the analysis of the need data they need. And just to remember that we have a minimum 25% of direct payment dedicated to eco schemes, and the minimum 35% of the funds for the world development that should be dedicated to environment and climate. So climate is there in the CAP, and it can be indeed a tool that can have an important impact in the management of farmers that can bring toward the sequestration of carbon. Next slide, please. These are a set of practices that we mentioned in the communication. Although they don't want to be exhaustive, but these are some practices that we identified as very important, and also which might have most of the case co-benefits in terms of our ecosystem and biodiversity. We recognized, for example, that the effect of the local condition, pedoclimatic conditions, on the effectiveness of these practices. So this is another important thing to consider. The CAP indeed can support the implementation of these practices, but it's important that the other elements that we have in the CAP when we talk about the flexibility, which is exactly for that, to ensure that the best strategy is tailored to the local conditions and then can deliver the higher result in terms of mitigation potential. So here there are some of those. I probably don't need to repeat them because basically they have been already discussed this morning. Next slide, please. So what the CAP can do, very briefly, we already have, you see in the new common agricultural policy, the link with the carbon sequestration and carbon protection. It starts already in the conditionality. We have a reinforced conditionality. There are new GAECs. They have a specific objective which are directly linked with that. For example, on preserving carbon stocks, on the protection of carbon-rich soils, or maintenance of soil organic matter. These are the GAEC starting from 1 to 3, which are basically dealing with this aspect, but also other standards which are maybe not directly mentioned in the regulation as specific objective on carbon sequestration, but they have actually an effect on that. For example, the one on minimum soil covers, the GAECs on crop rotation, and even the one on landscape measures. So the CAP can already have a good contribution already in the basic conditionality. And then what is important there is to highlight the link, the important role of the CAP in the protection of carbon. That's basically one aspect that the CAP can have that maybe other typology of schemes probably supporting carbon sequestration can be more difficult for them to put in place. Of course, we have the eco scheme, as you know very well, and the rural development plan measures. With the eco scheme, with payment beyond the basic for action that goes beyond the basic conditionality, we can increase the ambitious in supporting practices that helps for carbon sequestration. We are all talking about here on practice on land which are having an effect on land, basically. And with the rural development measure, together with the agro-environmental measure, we see this as a very important tool for auxiliary situations, for example, and support. For example, think about the need for supporting advisory services, for knowledge exchange, for training, things, and the possibility, as already mentioned by Anne this morning, to create operational groups at local level for start piloting a project with the support of what is actually the measure 16.1 on cooperation for innovation. These are very important tools that I would say help in creating an enabling environment for supporting the adoption of carbon farming practices and the participation on farmers to carbon farming scheme. The Commission also published a list of potential agricultural park practices that can be included in the carbon farming, but again, it's you will see the same practices that we are going to be discussing today. We already, for example, also to reply to one of the questions we raised this morning, the CP can also support somehow the reduction of the cost of the MRV system, thinking at the fact that farmers, for example, with the very specific examples, can be supported for the soil analysis. Soil analysis are very costly, and it's a very important element, particularly for the starting point, where for us, and when we are particularly working on arable land to enter and understand the amount of carbon that we were able to sequester. So the CAP is not only again incentives for supporting the implementation of practices or good practices, but it also gives a lot of opportunity to support what else is missing there, and which are linked to the barriers that I already identified. Of course, there might be some some limitation for the CAP. For example, we know that carbon accumulation is very low process. It requires a lot of time, and CAP has a limited time frame. There are a lot of administrative burden that could hamper the implementation of a robust MRV within the CAP system. So we need to find solutions on that, but surely the CAP can be a very can have the role of helping with the startup in general of farmers in the participation of carbon farming. Here I also mention other potential public supports that might help carbon farming. A LIFE project already mentioned by Valeria this morning, again for piloting project, and cohesion policy also, they are very important, particularly when we are talking about restoration and conservation of peatlands, and also state aid. State aid is also an important source of support for investment, for agri-environmental commitments, again for advisory services, and also for try to build to build a support for the investment at farm level. Said that, it would also be important in the discussion that we are having this later on to understand, for example, how also these tools can help in building result-based farming scheme. So the discussion we had this morning about incentivizing practices or paying based on the result achieved, it's very important, and we have to understand how this how this way can be implemented within the CAP, for example, or under different public support. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. That was indeed what I wanted to say. I just want to focus you on the call for evidence for carbon removal certification, which is a very important step now that will be discussed this year. And remember that there is an open public consultation. I think Valeria already mentioned this morning, but it's good to remember. There is an open public consultation that it's open until May. So I really encourage you to reply to the question, because actually there it's where we will find questions on the barriers that we mentioned and the issues that are still pending. And then it's very important for us to understand how stakeholders and actors which are really working on the ground have an idea on this aspect. Thank you very much. I'm very eager to listen for the discussion we are having now.